Good afternoon, everyone. Today is Thursday, May 25th. I'm Caroline Bailey, a Professional Development Coordinator for the Developmental Disabilities Administration. We welcome you to the Maryland Community Practice for Supporting Families webinar series. Today's topic is visiting with your CCS in-person monitoring. This webinar is being facilitated by Marianne Kane-Bresci, Parent and Director of Family Supports for DDA. Her guests include Nicolette Parapodamas, DDA's Director of Coordinators of Community Services. Before we begin, I'd like to go over a few things about the webinar. All participants will be in listen-only mode. There are two options for listening to the webinar, by computer and by phone. If you have trouble hearing, you may try by switching by clicking the appropriate button on your webinar panel. There are handouts for this webinar, and you can find them in the handout section of the panel to the right of your screen. They can also be emailed to you if you're listening by phone. We will be recording the webinar, and we'd like to hear feedback from you to get on today's presentation and any suggestions you might have for future topics. So please use the question or chat box to the right of the webinar panel to provide it. And as a reminder, if you have questions related to your family member services, please contact your local regional office. And now I'd like to introduce Marianne Kane-Bresci.
Thank you, Caroline. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. On behalf of the Maryland Community Practice for Supporting Families, welcome to our webinar on visiting with your coordinator of community services in-person monitoring. The purpose of this webinar series is to bring individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, families, and others together to connect and share information and ideas in an effort to support one another as we move through everyday life. We discuss and address a variety of topics and concerns individuals and families face related to everyday life when we do this with our invited guests and subject matter experts, and always through the lens of charting the LifeCourse framework. Next slide, please, Caroline. So, what is charting the LifeCourse? For those of you who are unfamiliar with charting the LifeCourse, it is a set of universal principles and tools. Its fundamental principle states that all people have the right to live, love, learn, work, and play, and pursue their aspirations in the community. It was developed out of the University of Missouri, Kansas City's Institute for Human Development program, their family-to-family program, by individuals with disabilities and families to help others create a vision for their good life, think about what they're going to need to know and do, navigate and or develop the supports and resources that they'll need, and finally, truly just to discover what it's going to take to live the lives of their choosing and do it. At its core, charting the LifeCourse views the person within the context of family, however family is defined by that person. So it's context, we view the person within the context of family and community, and the critical role families play in the lives of their family members. When we, keeping this in mind, and when we think about the individual, we want to support the individual to achieve self-determination, interdependence, productivity, integration, and belonging in all facets of community life in order that they'll live their good life. And when we think about families, so we want to support, what Charting LifeCourse is about recognizing the role that families play, that by and large, families are the backbone of the service delivery system. And without families, we would perish, I think. We need families to support their family members. So we want to do that in such a way that we expand their capacity, their strengths, and unique abilities to best nurture, love, and support all of their family members to achieve their best and good life. Next slide, please. So coordinators of community services. So CCSs play a critical role in the life of a person receiving services from DDA. Among many things, they work with the person and the person's family and or team to develop and describe a vision for their good life. They consider all of the life domains and use integrated supports and services, tapping into all of the resources available to the person, beginning first with their own strengths and assets. They consider relationships, technology, community resources, and eligibility specific resources to create their good life. The CCS is responsible for making sure the person not only receives the supports and services he or she has been approved for, but that they are of good quality. And they do this through monitoring in a variety of ways. Today, next slide, please. Today, we're so fortunate to have Nicolette Paparadis, sorry if I butchered your name, Nicolette, here with us, who is the Director of Coordinators of Community Service with DDA, to talk more about the role of the CCS and the importance of in-person monitoring. Nicolette, welcome.
Thank you, Mary, and I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me today. And hello, everybody. So we have our agenda today. We're going to be reviewing what is the role of a coordinator of community service, right? And more specifically, what is in-person monitoring, as it is as part of their fundamental responsibilities? What are the values and challenges of in-person visits for both the CCS and families and people, and some potential solutions that we thought about. Next slide, please. So while, excuse me. So while we're reviewing and discussing throughout this presentation, we did want to provide a poll, such as that if you have any thoughts or ideas, we want you to share those with us. You can find it in the PowerPoint slides attached. There is a link under the chat that you can access a little bit more conveniently. And then even after our presentation, say you think of something later, we're going to be sending out a newsletter with this, the same survey, so that you have the opportunity during and after, understanding that we all think a little bit differently, or we have light bulb moments. Next slide, please.
Okay, well, to get us started, Nicolette, can you speak in greater length about the role, or in greater detail about the role of the CCS, as well as speak to the value of in-person monitoring? Thank you.
Sure.
Next slide.
Of course. Yeah, so the goal of the CCS is to promote services that are planned and delivered in a manner that encourages self-sufficiency, health and safety, community participation, and the individual's desired quality of life. You can see this a little bit more in COMAR 10.948, but we're just going to break it down just a little bit for you. So one of the responsibilities are interviews, right? So a CCS is coming in when someone first applies a DDA. They meet with the person and their family so that they can get to know them and understand their needs. They then complete required paperwork, of course, that's necessary to finalize the eligibility process. They also complete a person-centered plan, right? So people are the center of planning a vision for their personally defined good life. This is done through person-centered planning. The CCSs are responsible for facilitating these meetings, and this is required annually and whenever someone might need it. They also support with referrals and other related activities. So they assist people to get supports and services they need in order to achieve their best life. So specifically, it's not just, through a request through DDA, they can find resources, community resources, so someone could get more integrated in their community. Monitoring and follow-up, or as we're calling it today, in-person visits, right? The jargon is monitoring and follow-up, but what it really is in-person visits. It's important to the DDA that people are happy with their services and are living a good life. We want to make sure it's working. So we need our CCSs to make sure that you are getting just that. They talk to the person about their current living situations and whether or not their needs have changed. If they need any support with completing required Medicaid paperwork to keep their benefits and remain in the waiver. The CCSs review all incident reports and discuss if there have been any new medical, health services, or other needs, updates, any revision needs for emergency plans, and assist the person and their family in determining if other services or modifications for services are needed to meet any new health and safety needs, or if there's any dissatisfaction with your current services. So for people who are also on the waiting list, they will support any recommendations of a new DDA priority category. So the values, if we go to the next slide, they'll see a list of values here, right? And we're talking here about communication and relationships with the CCS and the person, getting you the services that you need, reaching your goals. There are life changes that happen. So when a CCS is visiting, they know when this is happening to best support someone, and even the health and safety, things happen. And the CCS wants to know so that they can best support. So only 7% of communication is spoken words and 38% is voice and tone. So 55% of communication is body language. So CCSs can miss 55% of communication if they're not meeting in person. So, and even if we're thinking about people who don't use words, even more can be missed. So a strong relationship is really important. You know, we want to be able to be open and honest, and it'll help build that trust, right? These are your services and you're in charge. And that CCS wants to make sure that you are satisfied and receiving those services and meeting your goals. If we could go to the next slide.
Well, I've just, so the next slide actually points to this. I wanted to ask you, Nicolette, about what are some of the challenges families have and or CCSs have related to in-person visits, and have folks had any success in finding solutions to these challenges? And if you could describe some of that for us, would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so as DDA works with CCSs and we speak with families, we've come to understand that there are times in which in-person visits can be challenging. Some of the examples that we've come to understand are if someone has health concerns, we understand that scheduling could be really difficult. We understand that the pandemic just changed things for us, and we just got so used to virtual options. Meeting someone could be uncomfortable, or having someone in your home could be really uncomfortable. And even just having a new CCS means it's a new relationship. And we understand, Marianne and I work closely together and we talk about this, and we understand that having someone new in your home could be, one, very uncomfortable, especially if you're having another new CCS, right? So some of those potential solutions and things to think about when these are barriers or challenges that you're faced with. If we could go to the next slide, please. So let's talk about health concerns, right? Let's think about, well, what are those concerns? Are you comfortable in sharing them with you or your family members, CCS? Think about what can your CCS do to ensure that you are safe? Can you share thoughts and ideas with them? And, overall, we want you to be and feel safe. So we want to know how we can do this, right? How can the CCS do this? How could the CCS take precautions as other specialists do? And what would make you feel comfortable? What does the doctor recommend? So then we can think about also what solutions there are. What solutions can the CCS and you find together? For example, can the CCS wear a mask? Could you meet outside on the porch or in the yard? Can you distance yourself socially? Could you even meet through a window or a door? Just brainstorm with one another. And think about how are you safe in other areas of your life? How are you visiting the doctor and friends and family, and maintaining, that comfortability for your health and safety? and think about how you could work that into when you're meeting someone, when you're meeting your CCS. And while we're also thinking about all of this, I do want to mention that a CCS will visit in the service setting. So as we were mentioning, you know, if it's not in the home, are you going out in the community with, let's say, if it's personal supports? We're building, you know, communication. Community integration, right? We're going in the community. Is that somewhere a CCS can meet and do those personal support services? Schedules, right? We're busy people, our lives. They're not just revolving, you know, just as a human being, our schedules could be just so overwhelming sometimes, right? So I think just coming together and thinking about, okay, the CCS is going to work around you, essentially. If they don't, you should most definitely let their supervisor know this, because they're working with when you're available, right? So with this, also consider though that they do have a deadline, right? We do have requirements that has to be met through the state, and just to make sure that these deadlines were created to make sure people are constantly getting what they need and are happy. That's essentially why they were first established in the first place. So I think it's also important for everyone to know that unless you're in a crisis, the CCS will meet with you at least once a year. So keep that in your mind too. Now let's talk about accustomed to virtual options during COVID. Think about what's your new normal, what are your services moving forward. As I mentioned, when you're utilizing services and you know, you have services to meet your goals, a CCS is going out to see those services in action, right? So they're going into the community if, you know, you have a service to support that. They're going in to visit at the day hub to see if they're satisfied there. Or if someone's living in a community living group home, they're also visiting there. So it's more on, are you happy with the services you're receiving? So it could work with, you know, scheduling out your year ahead of you. What's it looking like for the year ahead? What time of year would maybe be best if an in-person visit in the house has to be done? Work with your CCS on that. Is it better in the summertime or do you prefer in the springtime? Those are some considerations. Oh, let's talk about if there's some uncomfortability or you have a new CCS. It's really important to communicate, right? Again, communicate your needs and concerns. Use your Charting the LifeCourse tools, right? They could help aid in those conversations and communicate what your needs are. And then talk with the CCS supervisor if you feel like that connection just isn't there. It's really important to have a connection with someone you're going to be working with for a long time, right? You have to think about if they're the right match for you, and it's completely fine. It's your choice. You know, and if it makes you feel more comfortable, reach out to the DDA office. And like they say, if the shoe fits, right? So it's completely fine. We want to make sure that you know that it is okay to change if you just don't feel that connection or feel comfortable. Next slide, please. So takeaways, right? It's really important to us that you are well and getting the services and supports you need to live your best life. We want to work together with you to ensure it's happening. We recognize and understand there are challenges to meeting in person, but taking the time to build the relationship with your CCS and figuring out what works best for you is the key to success with your CCS. Overall, if you and your CCS or your family members, CCS can work together to find that solution, then everyone wins. If you work together and your CCS to find workable solutions, you can get the most benefit from your DDA services. And then the CCS is satisfied knowing that they are serving you well and doing the job they were hired to do. So overall, the takeaway is remember that the CCS is there for you. So we're talking working together and communicating, talking it out, coming up with creative ideas and teamwork. So again, what works for you?
Good. Nicolette, this is fantastic. So I'd like to just say, at first, thank you, Nicolette, for briefly describing the role of the CCS, the value of in-person monitoring and the reason for it, as well as identifying the challenges that some folks are having, as well as solutions that some folks have found and offering solutions to others. It's been great to hear from you. And now what we'd like to do is, for those of you in our audience, we'd like to provide you with an opportunity to ask any question you might have, and hopefully we'll be able to respond to that. So with that, I'd like to welcome Jessica Chittams, who is our Regional Coordinator of Family Support on the Eastern Shore. Jessica has been monitoring the questions, and she's going to share them with us. Jessica, thank you.
Thank you, Mary Ann.
Thank you.
Just had some questions about the location of the PowerPoint. It is in the handout section, but it's a PDF format. So if you're looking for PowerPoint, look for a PDF. Just wanted to make sure that was clarified for folks.
Thank you.
We do have just a few questions here. The first is, do CCSs review all ABC reports?
ABC.
I'm not familiar with an ABC report. Is that an acronym maybe we can expand on?
Antecedent behavior and consequences.
Okay. So the behavioral plan is what we have at DDA. So if the question is asking if the CCS should follow the ABC, I think that's definitely something to talk with the CCS and the supervisor if it's something that would be helpful. I think that if my question is, what my understanding is of the question is, if it needs to be followed, then definitely share it with your CCS.
Okay, we have a follow-up question to that. If parents are also entitled to review the ABC reports and incident reports.
So the ABC reports, I think I believe it's going to be, we're talking about the same thing. I think we might be talking about behavioral plans, and those should be, even if it's an ABC report, whatever you want to call it, it should be in the person-centered plan. So whatever's in that person-centered plan is part of that monitoring. So if staff are required to follow that ABC, right, then that CCS is making sure that it is being followed. That's part of the service delivery system, and that's what they're ensuring, right? That services are being delivered as it is written in their person-centered plan. And part of that person-centered plan encompasses everything. So that ABC would be part of that person-centered plan. Definitely the team together are working on all of those components. If there are incident reports, I can get back to you on that, but my understanding with PORI, right? So PORI is our policy on incident reporting. If there is something that occurs with your loved one and you're part of that team, then the family and the CCS are to be notified within 24 hours, if I'm not mistaken, but you should be knowing what has happened.
Great, thank you. We have another question. I think that we're all aware that there are provider shortages and worker shortages just impacting folks all across the country in different capacities. And so we do have a question here, and just kind of a statement that sometimes it's really hard to connect with folks, their CCS when there may have been some recent turnover, if they felt really connected to someone and they've left for whatever reasons. And so it was just basically a question, is there any efforts to, kind of help retain CCSs, and if just to help the families with this specific issue of feeling more comfortable allowing folks in the home and things of that nature.
Absolutely. That is something that impacts all of us, especially you. We want to ensure that CCS love their job, right? So we are working, I think, in the grander scheme of things to make sure that that's happening. So within DDA, yes, we are working towards that.
Nicolette, can I offer something as well? In addition to what you've just said, as a family member, as a parent, it is difficult to have new people come into your life, and there are times where the turnover of the CCS might be high or frequent, and as a result, it's difficult to trust again. And that said, one of the things, Nicolette, and you alluded to it earlier, using, whether you use the Charting the Life Course tools or not, but a strategy for a family member might be if you can put together a brief portfolio or a brief description of the family member that you're supporting in such a way, in a very positive light, right? And you're sharing this information and any other information that you might want to share about yourselves, and be able to present that to the new CCS in a way that it facilitates them coming to know you and better understanding who you are, could be and is potentially very helpful. But it is, it is difficult and it can be challenging, but that's one strategy that you might use in preparation of receiving a new CCS, and just assisting them in knowing both of you, or how many ever of you are there, better and more easily and more quickly. Also, I would say too, and Nicolette, you said this several times, you have to know, you just have to know that you can request a new CCS, and you can reach out to that CCS's supervisor, and not to fear any kind of backlash or anything at all. It's about choice, and it has to be comfortable. You're planning your life, or you're supporting your family member in the planning of their life, and you've got to be supported by someone that you trust and who can assist you in doing so. So it is your absolute right to do so, and please act on that if you need to. Jessica, are there any other questions?
Yes, we have several coming in here.
Terrific.
Do the CCSs have access to a multi-language forum?
Yeah. It is, if they need a form that is in a different language, one, they could also reach out to DDA to have it translated to the language that you need. If it's not already, we don't already have it. But absolutely.
We have some comments in the chat about ideas. So one idea that someone is presenting is for CCSs to do a handoff meeting from one CCS to another. And there should be a plan within the agency to know, how do we communicate what's happened before or what's going to be happening in the future. There's that one. I'm gonna just mute myself. There's a couple in here that are a little bit lengthy, so I'm just gonna give myself a minute here to try to scan through that.
Sure, and I just, with regard to that last comment, that's a brilliant comment, and I can't tell you how often when I and I often hear from families who are struggling. I don't hear from the thousands of families who are happy. That's my job. And generally, with regard to that with the turnover of staff, that they themselves are not made aware of. So not only is there not a handoff, but they're not even aware of the fact that their CCS has left, and that also causes, so for CCS agencies, something to consider, that causes a great deal of anxiety, potentially frustration, and potentially mistrust. So perfect. That's a great
Yeah,
idea.
I love that. Absolutely. Yeah. And I do want to let you know what we're doing with this feedback is exactly, we're going to be giving it to the CCSs as well. So keep them coming. And then even if you want to add it into the survey too, that would be great too. But no, I love that idea. I agree. I couldn't agree more.
And another thought for any of you CCSs that are out there in the audience, if you have ideas and want to make some recommendations for families, we'd love to hear that now too, because it really is it's a two-way street here, and we know that. And any ideas you have are welcome.
Okay, we have just a general comment about how important it is for CCSs, the relationship building component, to ensure participants have the services and supports that they need. We have another comment here about, and this again, you know, that relationship building, learning folks' preferences. Someone else, you know, really the new CCS, it would be really important in their opinion, you know, for the CCS to really read through things so that parents and the individual aren't having to repeat the same information over and over again. And I think that, you know, if we look at that, and maybe other folks would want to be able to share, you know, with someone that's new. So again, that relationship building, a lot of these comments, just how important this is. Another question, does my CCS only have to visit once a year, or can they visit more?
They can visit more. Absolutely, they can visit more. Yeah, we're just talking about minimally, right? What's that requirement minimally? If you need it more often, right? Communicate that with them.
We have someone also that, a staff member that responded just to kind of clarify the ABC report a little bit, that the CCS is typically only notified if it's a reportable incident in PCIS. And so they may not always be notified of that. So I just wanted to have that clarified. That's from a staff member. Let's see here. I think that's all that I'm seeing right now as far as questions. A lot of good discussion though coming in. So thank you everyone for sending in their comments. And I think that it just goes to show what some of the things Nicolette was saying about relationship building and making sure that you know, CCSs are meeting families where they are and really listening to what, you know, their needs are and their preferences are. Oh, we have one more. Does the visit have to be conducted in a certain way?
Yeah, and so just so you know, we are going to have a monitoring and follow-up, right? That's what we call it, but in-person visit training for CCSs in the near future. So you're more than welcome to attend that. I do want to put that out there. So when it comes out in a newsletter, know that you're invited to that. The visits do have to be completed in a matter of, if we're talking about requirements, right, we say at least in each service setting throughout the year. It has to be in a different service setting. So it also depends how many services you're receiving. So for example, like I was saying, if you have day services or employment, the CCS is going out to those sites. And they are asking questions, right? Are you happy with your services? You know, what's progress been like? Where are you at now? And they know all of this because it's in your PCP. So they're utilizing that person-centered plan to know and how to gauge those conversations. There are questions, right, that we want to make sure of. Like we said, are you happy with your services? Are you achieving your goal? Or where are we in that? Are you healthy and safe? Have there been any changes? And all of these questions are to help guide the CCS into, are there next steps, right? They're going to be assessing. Maybe Nicolette doesn't know about this resource that I could offer them that would help them with this. So that's where this is all, you know, alluding to, just understanding where you are in that time and what next steps might need to be. And they talk with you on that. Sometimes a team meeting might be needed, right? Something's changed in your life. We might need to revise the plan to help support you if, you know, that's what the need is.
Okay, we have several questions that just flew in here. Okay. If a family prefers to have a CCS visit once per year, but the agency asks that CCSs visit each quarter, how could this be handled?
So they are required when someone is in services, they need quarterly visits. Now, I didn't want to get into the nitty gritties, but an in-person visit, right? When you're in services, it has to be quarterly, right? So there's 4 visits a year in person. That's the state regulations, they have to. So what we're saying here is if a service is within your home, right? Whatever that goal is, the CCS should come in to see how that visit's to see how that service is being provided in the home, and talking with the person in the family to see, you know, next steps or if you're satisfied again. So it really depends on how many services you have, right? Because again, they have to go in each service setting. So if you only have 1 service and a lot's in the home, maybe once in the home, in the community, it really depends. It's a gray area, right? Because you could be out in the community with the service, you could do it at home too. So it really depends.
Okay. Can the CCS participate in activities with the individual, or they are just there watching? Because this might feel a little awkward.
Well, they're not just, it's more of, no, they're going to be talking to you. They're not just watching, you know. Yeah, they're coming over and saying, hey, how's it doing? Remember, we're building a rapport too. They're checking in on you.
So an example, Nicolette, might be if, could you go to lunch?
Yeah.
You know, so if the person receives personal supports to be supporting them in the community to be integrated, and so the CCS could enjoy lunch with the individual, and any other activity that individual might be engaged in, the CCS might take that opportunity to engage in that same opportunity. That's completely allowable, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome.
Okay. What is the protocol or the procedure if someone is just refusing in-home visit?
So again, we have to work with our CCS. What is it that you're refusing? What is it, you know, understand where that's coming from. I think there's a little bit of self-reflection there. And again, right, if it's a matter of your health that you're really concerned about, what does your day-to-day life look like without your CCS? You know, are you going out into, you know, what are your doctor's visits? Again, when you're going to the doctor, or you know, if you have a nurse that comes to visit, what is that nurse doing to make you feel more safe and protected? I think that's what we have to think about here. because services, go ahead, Marianne.
No, I didn't mean to cut you off. I thought you were done. Go ahead, finish.
I know, it's, oh, what is that analogy I wanted to think about? Go ahead, Marianne, let me think about it.
So I'm wondering if whoever may have asked that question, can you provide us with some examples that folks have offered as reasons as to why they're refusing to meet in person? I'd love to hear. And I love this because I feel like, gosh, we're really having a dialogue with the audience, which is fantastic. And that's what this was always ever meant to be. So if you can offer that, that would be great, but no worries if you can't. But it would help us a little bit.
Okay. Do the CCSs, do they only see me when I'm receiving services, or can I be visited at home where I don't receive services?
It should be in the service setting. So where you're receiving services.
Okay, I'm gonna just let this sit here. Anyone else that has questions, please leave those in the chat if there's more. Also, some folks have asked questions that maybe are a little bit outside the scope of this topic. And if you do have questions, please reach out to your regional office, and we can also help get you that contact information in the chat. If it's something that you want to reach out, we can get you the contact information for that regional office. So.
Righty.
And Marianne, someone had put in here, coordinators are hearing from families that there's a vulnerable member of the family in the home.
Okay. Okay. And so there's a health concern. And so Nicolette, I'll let you speak to that.
Again, yeah, we have to think about, and it's similar, right? It's not even just the person, it's your home, whoever is vulnerable. Is that where the service is being provided, right? What is that service that's being provided in the home? Is that a staff coming in? What is that staff doing when they're coming in? How are they ensuring the health and safety of everybody? How are they? So it's similar to that. And, utilize that and work with your CCS to understand what they need to do too. If the service isn't in the home, then the CCS is making that visit where the service is being provided.
Okay. Okay. Okay, well, thank you. Jess, are there any more questions?
Just some, let's see here. Just some people, maybe some clarification if the difference between licensed sites or if visits can occur in other places, just some clarification about the non-service settings for visits. That was just something somebody had asked.
Non-service setting, are we talking, give me some examples. So are we talking about assistive technology, and that's for?
So if none of your services take place at the home, do you do home visits? If we're only doing it in places where the service is taking place? That was one clarifying question.
So, trying to think, I guess an example would be
maybe someone who just is receiving day services, so that's not in the home.
Right, yeah, they would be visiting at the day site.
Yeah. And supported employment or follow along supports. You'd meet with them in that space and not in the home. Yeah.
Right, but we also have to consider too, if there are needs, right? Say there was more assistance that's needed to maintain your waiver eligibility. Maybe you got a letter Would you want to have that conversation, you know, at the day center, or would you prefer to say, hey, next visit, why don't we talk about it here and talk about a little bit more about how my services are being rendered too? That's completely fine as well.
Yeah.
I think the confusion is just related to home visits versus visits at the location where the services are being provided. Because I think sometimes we say like visiting the home versus, and so I think that was just creating a little bit of just confusion, because we're using some of these things interchangeably for folks that don't receive services within their home. So.
Right.
Yeah.
So even, I mean, this is a broad, right? Again, it's not a gray area. I mean, it is a gray area. It
Yeah.
really depends on, and I'm talking about it in the broad context, right? If we're talking about person-centered, it would look different for everyone.
Yeah.
If you're waiting for services, right? So say you haven't been approved for the waiver, then there's no services and the CCS is visiting in your home at least once a year. More frequently if there are health and safety or, you know, there's crisis occurring. So it's hard to give that direct answer because there isn't one. So it really depends on you.
Yeah, and I think too, the challenge is, so sometimes we're using in-person visits interchangeably with home visits, and they're not necessarily the same. An in-person visit can take place in the community. It could take place in the place of employment, or wherever that might be. But and generally there aren't challenges with those spaces. That's not the challenges that we're hearing of, right, Nicolette? The challenges that you hear about are those in-person visits that need to take place in the home, because it's in the home that the individual is receiving those supports and services. And then how do we address those challenges?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're talking about when they are in the home, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. Well, Jess, are there any other questions?
No, there's just some discussion about like, does COMAR require, like I guess it's some CCSs thinking COMAR required one home visit per year, and just where visits can take place. So there's just continued discussion about that. So this is good for us all I think it's a good conversation
Absolutely.
for us to all have to make sure
Yeah.
that we're, and families are all aware of what can go on and what visits can look like. So, but other than that, I think we're good. And again, folks that have questions outside the scope of this, we have Adenda Rojas is reaching out to you in the chat to provide the contact information for the regional offices. So.
Okay. Well, Jess, thank you so much. Did a great job. This is Jessica's first time monitoring and asking questions, so well done. Dendi, thanks as well for reaching out to folks. And of course, Nicolette, great job. And I think this is food for thought, and especially as we prepare to offer it's a webinar on in-person monitoring. And thank you all for your contribution and your thoughts and feedback. It's essential if we're going to be able to best support families and individuals in the community. So with that, we hope you all are well. Oh, thank you, Caroline, for your assistance with this, and of course, Deputy Secretary Simons, who's making all of this possible. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much.